Thanks for listening to the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. If you're joining us for the first time, please subscribe, leave me a review. That'd be great. Let me know how I'm doing. At least give me your first impressions anyway. Those of you who come back, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to know more about the podcast and blog, go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com, and you can even leave questions or thoughts on the send voicemail button to the right of the page. Today, I have a very special guest, and I think you're going to like her very much. Her name is Sarah Morgan. Her blog is The Buzz on HR. And you can go to thebuzzonhr.com. It is a very respected blog on human resources. And I brought her on to, as an HR executive and an HR expert. She wants to be sure that HR is that place where people can rely on and come to for all employee needs. And that includes job seekers. Now, to qualify a little bit, and Sarah, you can correct me, you're not currently the direct hiring manager. You're the executive that manages the hiring HR person.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. As a part of my team, I manage talent. So that takes care of both recruiting and onboarding. So I see a lot of it from the recruiter side, the hiring manager side. So this is a special opportunity for me because I get to talk to job seekers specifically, which I don't get to do a lot of. So this is awesome. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, and I love having it, and I definitely need a lot of you to go to the Buzz on HR to read her blog. Your blog is going on about 6 or 7 years old, correct?
Yeah, it's 7 years old. It'll hit 8 in May.
Ah,
So, yeah, it's been a long journey over 300 articles posted on my own blog and tons of others written in other places. It's been crazy, crazy ride, but I love it.
yeah, we started about the same time. Mine will hit 8 in July.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time.
2011 was a very good year for bloggers. There's
It
a lot of us
was.
who came onto the scene at that around that same time period. So it was a very good year.
Absolutely, it was a very good year, I think, anyway. So let's kind of get started, and we're going to have a video version of this, y'all. So you should be able to catch the YouTube video. I'll let you know when it's live. It will probably live close to the time that this interview, you'll get it through iTunes. So stay tuned. This will be a lot of fun. In the meantime, let's talk turkey a little bit, all right?
All right.
So HR trends that job seekers should know about. And one of the things I thought about ultimately is how people hear all the talk about using LinkedIn to connect with hiring managers and things like that. Uh, Give me the real deal of what's an appropriate approach for job seekers to maybe get the attention of a hiring manager, or should they try to get in a direct attention of a hiring manager?
It okay, so if you have not applied to a position already and you are, just interested in working at a particular place, you want to join the team at that particular company when they have an opportunity. I
Hmm.
think it's totally appropriate to do, as I like to call it, a little loving social media stalking of
Yeah.
the people who work there
Right.
and connect with them on LinkedIn and try to build a natural rapport. What
Hmm.
you don't want to do is come off as, hey, I'm looking for a job. Like that's not going to work out well for any of you. But if you have an interest in that field, you want to get advice from that person, you want to add them to your professional network. And again, just start to build a relationship with individuals that work at that company so that when a position does come available, you can reach out and say, hey, I saw that this was posted. I'm interested in this position. I've submitted my resume and I would appreciate anything that you can do to help me get to the out of the ATS and to the top of the pile. I think that's completely appropriate. The way that we look for jobs has got to evolve.
Hmm.
And building relationships is the name of the game now. So you definitely have to connect with people in the process. And if you're able to do that strategically on the front end, I think that's wonderful. I have three people on my team right now who came to me as a result of connecting with me on LinkedIn, having read my blog and, seen my post there. And then when I posted a position and they were interested, come on in, we're going to interview you. But it was building that relationship on the front side 3 months, 6 months before we ever had an opening that made the difference between that. But if you show up just saying, asking for the hookup, as they like to say,
Right.
then you're going to have problems because people are going to see the authenticness of that right away, and it's not going to work to your advantage. But if you start from a sincere place of trying to build a relationship,
Hmm.
then connecting with someone through their social media channels and then working through that from there on, I think is great.
Yeah, and I've heard that before. I think we've all heard that before, but I think it needs to be said again. And you gave a proper timeline. I'm glad you said 3 6 months, because I think that works for anybody, not just an HR
Hmm.
professional. Is that you are already in it, which means for a lot of people that really, even while you're working before you become unemployed, that you should be thinking about, okay, who can I connect with this person so that in the future, at least it's a company I kind of like, and even if I don't work for them, they could have some intel that they can provide me to make my job
Absolutely.
search much more fruitful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember when I was and I'm in a senior director role now, but when I
Hmm.
was in an HR manager's position, my boss had been in his position for going on 15 years
Hmm.
at that time, and he wasn't going nowhere. And if he wasn't going nowhere, I wasn't going nowhere.
Hmm.
So if I want to advance, I got to do something different. And I did two things. I beefed up my LinkedIn, started, getting in touch with recruiters
Hmm.
and other HR professionals online and just trying to build my network and ask questions and figure out what to do. And the other thing I started doing was I looked at the jobs that I wanted. And
Hmm.
that was probably a good year before I ever applied to anything. But I looked at the jobs that I wanted and I said, okay, what are the things on here that I don't have? And what can
Hmm.
I do in between, now and the next 3 months, 6 months, a year to create projects and opportunities for myself where I'm at to be able to prepare myself for that position so that when I put my resume out there later on, I'm ready and I'm not going to have to, wait for long. My network is tuned, my resume is tight, I'm good to
Hmm.
go. And I think it was a great practice for me. I would recommend it for any job seeker. Don't worry about, where you are. Start thinking about where you want to get to and what are the skills and experiences and the connections of people, the relationships, the network that you need to have to get you there and start building on those pieces. And that takes time. Showing you can't just show up and say, I want a job, I'm right, I'm ready, give it to me. It's just not how the world is going to work. For 99% of us, there's always going to be one, but for the vast majority of us, it's just not how it's going to work. So you got to have a plan for how you're going to attack that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think for not the fact that you've said something new, for the fact that you're speaking from your position and saying that this is how it works, even for my position,
Mhm.
uh, should bring some perspective to everybody else who's applying. I know that I have friends who went to even go as far as, if we can kind of turn the conversation like 120 degrees a little bit, towards HR professionals who want to get into HR for the first time.
Yeah.
That's a skill to master, for themselves. A lot of them, they went and got their masters in human resources, or got their
Hmm.
MBA, and they had a little bit of HR experience through internships, or that they ended up being a generalist as a default person because they were only the person in the company that could possibly do the role. And yet they have a hard time maneuvering because they have a hard time accepting that the degree just isn't enough to get
Hmm.
somebody's attention.
Yeah, I lived that for,
Uh huh.
for a minute, after I got my master's and I was in a benefits management role.
Mm-hmm.
And I I love employee relations. Like, that's the area of HR that just sets me on fire. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that there's so much opportunity in it. And that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be handling the employee experience. I wanted to be handling investigation issues and talking about, the development of people and our culture and all of that kind of stuff. And wasn't nobody trying to hear that when I had
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
a
Right.
master's degree and probably and probably about, 3, maybe 5 years of experience.
Mm.
So I had to say, all right, I got to bloom where I'm planted. I was fortunate that I had leaders who were willing to give me a shot and say,
Mm-hmm.
and I started with taking on unemployment claims and winning those successfully, which any practitioners know is hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then that moved into handling some of the lower level investigations, and then that got bigger and that got bigger and that got bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I am where I am, but that took time. And I find in dealing with people wanting to get into the HR profession, the patience just
Mm-hmm.
isn't there. And there's some stuff, sorry to break it to you, that experience is the only teacher. There is no book in the world that prepares you for some of the conversations that you have to have with employees and managers when you start dealing with complex issues,
Mm-hmm.
within, as a human resources professional, you are dealing with every single solitary sensitive area of a person's intersection between work and life.
Mm-hmm.
You are dealing with their pay, you are dealing with their time off, you are dealing with their family leave, and if they're sick, and if they're disciplined or having performance issues, all of that is in your lap. Books just don't prepare you for that. They don't. And so it's hard to maneuver. What I would suggest for people looking to get more into that HR space, definitely look for volunteer opportunities. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of smaller organizations, nonprofit organizations looking for support who don't have an HR staff, and it may only be, a short term project that you do part time, but it's going to bolster you and give you that level of experience. And then the other thing you have to do is within the organization where you are, like I said, is bloom where you're planted.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your leaders
Mm-hmm.
and say, these are the things I want to do in my career. How can we create space for me to be able to do that here? Most of If you got a good leader, most of them are going to respond positively
Mm-hmm.
to that. If you don't, then their reaction is going to show you everything that you need to know about your future in that organization, and you got a different set of decisions
Right.
that you have to make. And go back to the other advice
Mm-hmm.
about your 3 to 6 month plan
Right.
of working your network and getting all those things in place.
Yeah. The job search is a job within itself.
It
And the
is, and you have to be
preparation,
committed to it.
and the preparation is a job within itself. People are thinking, and they hear the sexy stories how things have happened for somebody else really quick, really fast, and so one person out of 10,000 caught lightning in a bottle.
Yep,
You can't count for that, nor can you predict it, nor
yep,
can you repeat it. And
yep.
I've actually seen where somebody got lucky one time, the next when people are just not willing to get that part, which kind of leads us a little bit to some of the intangibles that probably you've seen. I know you've seen because we've talked about how persistence goes quite a bit of ways these days.
Yeah, it does.
And we're not talking about being annoying. Annoying and persistence are two
Are two totally different things. It's a
absolutely.
thin line. It's a thin line, but no, they are two totally different things. Persistence is necessary. Recruiters and hiring managers tend to be juggling a lot of multiple requisitions.
Hmm.
Most of your hiring managers are the manager of the department where you're going to be going to work the majority of the time.
Hmm.
So if the position that you are applying for is open, chances are that manager is short staffed, which then makes their time much more, spread out. And depending on how good of a time manager that individual is, that can lead them to not be as quick with feedback and those sorts of things. And those are all realities of, what goes on the other side.
Right.
So
Right.
it's important for a candidate to be persistent in their follow up with the recruiter and the hiring manager, whoever it is that's guiding that process about what's going on with them in the process. I think following up every day or several times a day is probably too much. But
Hmm.
usually that person will give you some sort of time frame of this is when you can expect to hear from us. If you don't hear that, ask. There's nothing wrong with saying, what are the next steps in this process?
Hmm.
And when can I expect to hear from you, or when should I follow up with you? And then maybe give it another 24 hours after that. And then say, all right, let me send this person an email or give them a phone call to see, what's going on. Thank you notes and emails and those sorts of things after an interview, not just to the recruiter, but to the hiring manager. Sometimes you may end up in a panel interview with multiple people. Everybody gets a thank you note. Like
Hmm.
those sorts of things go such a
Yes.
long way to demonstrate your interest, your professionalism, your thoughtfulness. Those are all of the good foot forwards that job seekers definitely want to put out there. So
Hmm.
handwritten thank you notes are like a lost art. I think I've gotten one in the last 5 years, and I was just like flabbergasted. I
I
was like, I got
usually,
mail, like real live mail.
yeah, I usually recommend the handwritten note, and a lot of times you can pre-write that,
Yes, you
as
can.
long as you have the right name, and then you can stick it in the mailbox that's in front of the building, and
And
that's
then it
and then they get it
saves
the next
time.
day, and it saves time. They
Hmm.
get it within 24 hours likely. So well, the big cities, I don't know about the smaller cities, but nevertheless, all to say that it could be time, or you can have it delivered to the person who referred you, which is also options. There's a lot of ways to get the person something handwritten in a timely fashion. It's
Hmm.
made as big a deal as you make it,
Yeah.
for sure. But I appreciate that about the thank you notes because we've talked about that on the show a lot, and I've written plenty about it. Sometimes I wonder if it falls on deaf ears because still, um, people I've talked to probably they say about 20% of all candidates they run across even bother to email, much less write.
Yeah,
I
I would
think,
say no matter what level of job it is that you're seeking, from, entry level to senior level, a thank you for your time, and just to reiterate, your interest in the company, possibly provide them with some, because everybody walks out of interviews and thinks of the thing they didn't say.
yeah.
And that those thank you notes or thank you emails are a perfect opportunity for you to say, as I reflected on our conversation, I remembered this and I wanted to share with you
Hmm.
that kind of experience. And then sometimes you may, I remember we had a candidate for a position on our team who, during the course of my interview with her, I told her I like memes. You know this.
Right.
I love
Yes,
memes. I love
you
gifs.
do.
And she sent me a meme, as her thank you note because she said, I know that you like these. And
Mm-hmm.
she made a meme and and I loved it. But she took something that she learned in the room and then applied it to her approach and personalized it to me. It was brilliant. And now
Absolutely.
ultimately, I sadly, we did not hire her, but not because not because of that. We just, we ended up with a candidate that we felt was a better fit ultimately. But I still gave her the feedback. I thanked her and I said, listen, if I know of any, we connected on LinkedIn. If I can help you in your job search, that's those sorts of things.
And
It
that
may not, it
goes a
may not be
long way.
that, yeah, it goes a long way, and it may not be this opportunity,
Hmm.
but it may be the thing that helps you get your next opportunity, and you just got to build those blocks.
And the thing is, you remembered her, and you
And
still
still do.
remember, and still
Hmm.
remember her. And if you can manage to get a few allies like that in your job search, you will, don't just think even about the next job. Think about even the next job beyond that,
Yep.
2, 3, 4 years down the line. It's equity. It
It is.
grows.
It is. There have been, and that's one of the things I will say I've tried to be intentional about. With it's hard out here for
Hmm.
job seekers, and so we get some really great candidates for various positions. I get pulled in quite a bit for final interviews or to sit in with some of our newer hire managers who aren't as strong
Hmm.
of interviewers just to, kind of show them how it's done
Hmm.
and make sure and two, to make sure they don't ask nothing crazy, like stay on the script. We got to make sure all that happens.
Right.
So, but if I find someone who I think, is really great, but we don't have a place for them, I all will always invite them to connect with me on LinkedIn and stay in touch and pass their information along because it's hard, and I tell that to our talent team. Our job is to find people jobs. And sometimes that means not finding them a job with us, but
Right.
connecting them with someone else in our network and pushing them towards a different opportunity. And that's why us being on top of our game is so important, and knowing the other people, let's not look at each other as competition. Let's look at each other as allies
Hmm.
and build a core, and be able to share, information about who we know and what we've learned about candidates along the way is so important. And I'm glad that we've been able to do that. I'm glad that my team has embraced that as a mentality, and I think it's taken us far.
Yeah, and I think even to for a job seeker to, I think it's a job seeker's mission to create a conversation, not
Yes.
not just the conversation that happens formally, but also to be able to create that conversation that goes beyond that 1 hour or two
Hmm.
hour conversation where where most of the time where an HR person is not a trained HR hiring manager. So
Hmm.
they go by a script, they go by their gut instinct, and sometimes neither one turns out really well.
Hmm.
But there are times when the job seeker has to kind of take bull over the horns and create a conversation, not just for that moment, but beyond that moment. Even if it means that you didn't get the job, still it may not be an ongoing conversation, but there's a conversation that you can come back to should you need that person again, such as what you're discussing there, is that LinkedIn connection. You see their updates, they see yours, they see what you're writing about. They may even comment on what you've written about. That's
Hmm.
what's so great about blogging, but that's for another podcast.
That's a different podcast.
That's a different
Yes.
podcast that I've had people on to talk about and talk about how important that is. But there's a lot of different opportunities to continue conversations, and there might be a lot of little conversations, but they're not that
Hmm.
hard to keep up with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important. It's I think for job seekers, you can take every opportunity in your search to build your network, learn
Mm-hmm.
something, grow something, make a professional friend,
Yes.
that you can cultivate a relationship with that may not help you get a position today,
Mm-hmm.
but later on the line can pay big dividends to you. There was a candidate that we had interviewed for a payroll position few 2 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and she just didn't have quite as much experience as the person we interviewed after her, and so we ended up selecting the the next candidate. But I was so impressed with her, I stayed in touch with her on LinkedIn, and I remember seeing a recruiter friend of mine posting a different position that didn't, have the same requirements as ours. I put the two of them together right away. She got a job. She's still working there.
Good
Like, it's
deal.
those sorts of things that you just have to be on the lookout for. And I know not everybody is willing to do that, but more people are than not, particularly in this day and age when people are starting to understand the importance of having that network and that community, if you will, of people
Mm-hmm.
to help with your growth and your development and create opportunities. So anything that you can do to continue to cultivate that and just build those kind of relationships, I think is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, if people can just think beyond the current transaction,
Yes.
and and make it a whole lot more than a transaction, there's just a meaningful communication that even can last for years to come
Yeah, hiring
if you're just.
managers have to be smarter on that end too,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that sometimes we get bogged down in the transactional end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I had talked about this in pre-show. The next thing you know, this interview, this conversation you're supposed to be having with the person turns into this like rapid fire
Yeah,
of questions.
the Spanish
And
Inquisition.
yes, and that's not what good interviews are supposed to be about.
Yeah.
And so we have to be mindful that particularly if you are interviewing someone or if you are in an interview with someone and you know that this person is going to be your direct manager,
Mm-hmm.
that it is so essential that you build a connection with that individual and try to like catch a vibe for who this person is because that's who you're going to be working for. And in most organizations, you at some point in their interview process, you're going to talk to the person who's going to be your direct supervisor. There is
Mm-hmm.
nothing more important than making sure that you build a proper rapport at that moment and taking every opportunity that you can in that conversation to slow down the pace and really dig in and try to get inside that person's head and figure out how they manage, because that individual is the person who is going to dictate what's a lot of what's going on in your work life in the day to day. And if you don't feel a good connection with that individual, that's probably not the job environment for you. And as a seeker, you got to know when it's time to withdraw yourself
Yeah.
from the process. So many times I think job seekers are just trying to get the job that they forget how much power they have
Mm-hmm.
in that process, and don't give that up. It's not like you issuing ultimatums like, I'm going to walk, but we don't really, as hiring managers and recruiters, we don't want you to walk either. It's like, it's not easy to take that funnel of 100 applications and whittle it
Mm-hmm.
down to two or three people who are really, really solid that we can choose from. Those are not, that's not easy. And we surely don't want to start all over again when we feel like we finally gotten, to the right final candidate. So, but don't lose sight of the fact that you still hold cards,
Mm-hmm.
in the game, and think that you just have to go along with whatever it is that's being given to you, and that this isn't a conversation, that this person is just rapid fire inquisitioning you like you in an interrogation room and you don't have any room to say anything back. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring so much of the human aspect to the forefront here in our conversation, where now there's the perceived notion that that human part is missing even more, because one of the few things that candidates are running into there, or potential candidates anyway. I don't think you're a candidate till you actually start talking to a human. But
Yeah, I would agree.
having said that, there's filters that human resources have set up. It's first the pre-interview, and out of the worst scenario is, okay, how much are you expecting to make? It's like,
Mhm.
what?
What?
And then after you, if you can answer that satisfactory, then it's, oh, well, we want you to take an online assessment.
Hmm.
And then it's sometimes even another caveat before you can get to a real person, and that person is not actually the final decision maker. So there's also an amount of resilience that's involved
Yeah.
in these processes, but yet there's the company trying to sell us saying, "Well, we really care." It's like, really, through
You
through
care and you set this process up? No, you don't.
and that's the message. But I understand the other part of it too, is that if you get 100 applicants per position, there's got to be some way to tame the wild horses, so to speak.
Hmm.
Because everybody wants a shot, and everybody feels like their lousy resume should be the one that should make should
Yes.
make it should make it through the process. Which,
Yes,
uh,
of course.
yeah, so understand the odds are always against you, and that's why it's important to take the other routes. It's better to get the referral. Get the referral.
Hmm.
Why are you going to try to go through 100 processes? Because that's the way people apply, and that's human nature. Because our brains default to a shortcut.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see recruiters. I understand why recruiters are opposed to referrals, because in a lot of cases they're bonus, based on hires and the
Hmm.
effort that they put forth. So refer a lot of referrals tends to cut into their pot. But if you're doing your referrals smartly, they still, they may skip portions of the process, but they shouldn't skip go collect $200. That
Right.
shouldn't be the way that works. You still should, maintain those things, those, so that your recruiter has some skin, even in the success of referred candidates.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, it's hard because talent is one of when organizations are looking to get lean or going through financial struggles. Your talent in recruiting is one of the first areas that gets cut, probably like
Hmm.
right after training. It's like, oh, we don't need this many recruiters, and so we're not hiring people anyway because we're laying off, so
Right.
let's whittle this one down. And we don't rebound fast enough, so then we lump technology on top of it to help the recruiter out, because there may only be one or two of
Hmm.
them, and that's what happens. But we don't do enough to think about the human on the other side of that, and what that experience then becomes for that individual. And like you said, to tell someone that you care about them, but you've put them through all of these hoops and that don't match up with the job that they're looking to fill,
Hmm.
and the feedback in the meanwhile is not where it should be. Yeah, it's tough. I understand the need to kind of guard the recruiter and the hiring manager's time. I understand the need for wanting to do assessments for proper culture fit and those sorts of things. I just think that as on the hiring end of things, we have to be more mindful and intentional about the experiences that we're trying to create when we set that up.
Right.
And I always encourage, we do that a couple times a year with my team, is we go through the process. Like, we apply, like we're
Hmm.
trying to
Oh,
get that job,
nice.
so that we can see what the seekers are experiencing when they go into our ATS,
Hmm.
and they start to go through that funnel,
Hmm.
because it's important. For you can lose sight of it so really quickly if you don't check on it every once in a while, we to make sure that the questions that we're asking still are relevant and those sorts of things, because after a while you put things on autopilot and you just go. And your experience just gets off, and it takes more time. And then you've got somebody coming into your organization new who's just exhausted from
Right.
the
Right.
process of trying to get on board. But for the job seeker, I definitely agree with you. They have to be patient,
Hmm.
and resilient within that process, and know that, humans are flawed. And sometimes, the decisions and ways that we set them up is not truly designed to make it difficult for you. It's probably designed to make it easier for someone who already works for the organization.
Hmm.
And to some extent, there's a weird caring in that,
Yeah.
because they cared enough about that person who is working there to put these processes in place to try to support them. And
Hmm.
let's hope that they put those same, kind of guardrails around you should you get the job.
Right.
But that again becomes why networking and those sorts of things are so important. And I know you've talked a lot about, how you structure your resume and working your way through ATSs.
Hmm.
To make You got to know kind of the science behind tricking your way through all of those systems so that you don't get pushed out, too early in the process, and
Right.
can't get in front of somebody or can't get a person on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. By the time the first thing we're talking about on the new season, which is, by the time people hear this, this would have passed. We're talking about ATS and the resume, so that's very timely in what you just said. In the meantime, Sarah Morgan, the Buzz on HR. Thank you very
Yes.
much. It's the buzzonhr.com is the first place of engagement for you.
Yes, that is my website. All my blog posts are there, and it will take you to all my other social media channels. I'm the Buzz on HR pretty much everywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook,
Mm.
Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube. I try to make it easy for people to find me. So yes, the Buzz on HR is the place to connect.
Yes, it's a big deal to get this woman on the line for this long. She is very, very busy, and she just doesn't have time for all this foolishness that other people put out. But actually, you can hear some really great podcasts as well. You can look her up in iTunes and find her in several different great interviews. So thank you so much, my friend. You're a
Thank
gem
you.
and a half. And for the rest of you, you're gems too. And love that you've come back to me after all these years. We've been 6 years together. That's a long time for a lot of you. And you've stuck in there. Because I keep seeing the same names on my email lists. And a lot of you have still connect with me. And I love it. So thank you very much for being part of the TVOJS. And we'll look forward to hearing from you in a couple of weeks. Well, you'll look forward to hearing from me anyway. Have a great week.